Okay, cool. So we're here with Dave from Eureka Research. How you doing, Dave?
I'm very well. You, Joe?
Is it Dave or David? I've already messed that one up.
Only my mother calls me David.
Yeah, I get that. Whenever someone says Joseph, I'm like, I don't know who that is. But we're here to talk about the research that you guys have been doing with heating and plumbing engineers about the current situation and how them and their businesses are surviving, or what kind of work they're doing. So how did all of that come about?
So we're a market research company, as you say, Joe. About 3 weeks ago, all our work fell off a cliff as well. So we're a micro-sized business, just like many plumbing and heating companies and contractors are too. So we sort of scratched our heads and we thought we can either go into a cave and sort of do nothing and just hope that it all blows over and we can come out the other side, or perhaps more usefully, we can use some of our skills and our experience and try and apply it to the sector and try and do something good without sounding too cheesy. So we did a little focus group with a little band of installers who help us out with product testing and such like. And the idea of a big survey sort of grew out of that. And then kind of talking to you, Joe, and then some other membership organisations, the idea just like quickly grew and got sort of momentum really quickly. And everyone sort of brought into this idea of, if we can get enough installers to take part and give us their story about how they're coping with lockdown, then we're going to have a really sort of strong body of evidence, I guess, to get the attention of policymakers, get the attention of people who represent the industry in its broadest sense, and hopefully help those installers who feel that maybe the support isn't out there for them at the moment, or they're falling into one of those gaps in terms of the financial support that's out there. So, the evidence that is now going to come out of this could be really quite wide ranging, Joe.
So how many, what sort of numbers of people took up?
Took up the invitation. Well, you harassed most of them, Joe, but it was a really good outcome in the end. So I'm pleased to announce we got well over 1,000, over 1,100 installers who took part. In fact, a big slug of those, about 600, were on the heating side of the sector. There was about 200 of those who were just, well, I would call it sort of a jobbing plumber. And then the rest sort of fell between the two in terms of the sort of work that they do. Bit of everything, bit of installation work, bit of bathroom only, probably a few general builders in there as well. So overall, when you sort of put all that together, we feel we've got a really strong representative picture of the entire plumbing and heating sector. And here at Eureka, we do a lot of surveys and focus groups, and we've never reached anywhere near this sort of number, Joe, in terms of the number of replies that we've had. So both in terms of that quantity, like I mentioned, but also the quality. So I'd like to say thank you to each and every one of them, really, in terms of taking the time to fill out the online survey and give us such detailed responses. I could tell from some of the open answers on there that people were really thinking about the answers that they were giving and typing. I could also tell that a lot of people are either very worried about the situation that's currently in front of them, certainly very anxious, and there were some really good ideas in there as well, in terms of the things that brands could be doing for them and the things that government should be looking at as well, and all of that's gone into our report.
Yeah, so what were the things that really surprised you or stuck out to you when you were getting these responses?
There's some really big figures that have come out first and foremost. So when we kind of do our data churning process, we get some nice big juicy headlines, which are really important to not forget. So when you add everyone up, we now know that over the last few weeks, the first few weeks of lockdown, the sector's only been working at a fraction of what it normally does, 13%, in fact, when you add everyone together. About half of installers or small businesses in this sector have stopped work altogether. On the other side of things, some people are doing some work naturally, but it's probably emergency only. People are taking that definition of responding to emergency jobs very differently, and only about 40% of people who are doing emergency jobs are offering that to anybody. in terms of people that they don't necessarily know or have done jobs for before. So there's a real range in terms of the approaches that people have taken. But what sort of really strikes me, Joe, is that within each of those data points, within each of those 1,100 responses, there's a story, there's a family, and there's
a livelihood real life
behind it. It's real life, mate. It is. And each of those installers, and of course, they may have a different opinion this week as opposed to last week, because it's an evolving situation, but they will have decided to either work or not work, or offer emergency services or not offer emergency services based on their individual circumstances. I know some people had work taken away from them, but there's plenty of people that have actively stopped going out because, for instance, they've got family members who have long-term or underlying health conditions. So it was a real kind of health decision rather than a financial decision. But these are the realities of the world we live in now, aren't they, Joe?
Yeah, it is. It's good to get the research because it kind of backs up. We've seen a lot of stuff on social media that echoes exactly what you said, and everyone's in a different situation. And some people are still going out and doing work where they can and taking whatever precautions they can and what are advised by the government. And exactly that, other people have completely shut up shop. Others are worried about how long their business can survive. They can put some of their staff on furlough, but they can't furlough themselves, so they can get that, and then they can run that for as long as possible, but without knowing when all this is going to end or how things are going to be staggered out. They don't know. So yeah, it is important. Like the 1,000 people, you think, brilliant, that's a really good sample size, but I think you're right. You forget that is 1,000 different people with 1,000 different families in 1,000 different parts of the UK and all that. So I think that is really important.
Absolutely. The financial support has certainly come out that you mentioned there from the research as being something that certainly people are aware of. So that's always the first step, isn't it? Has the government done a good job in terms of making sure that people are aware of this? And the portal's now open on the furlough side, isn't it? So people can start or ask their accountants to start putting their claims in if they think they're eligible. We've found about 6 in 10 limited companies at the time of the survey were intending to use the furlough scheme. So that's a positive. A similar proportion are intending to use the self-employed support scheme when that comes online, if they're a sole trader or not a limited company. But I guess one of the other sort of sobering findings of the research, Joe, is that about half of everyone doesn't think that the financial support that the government's currently offering goes anywhere near as far enough. So it's welcome. It's better than nothing. It's good, but they're really quite worried that it's not going to cover all the bases for them going forward. And we've got about 12 or 13,000 companies that feel that they're actually going to fall between the gap as well. So they're neither eligible for the furlough scheme nor the self-employed support scheme also. So
yeah, the limited company owners who are one-man bands, there's definitely a gap. Which is, again, like you said, so then you get into a situation where if you still have to work and you legally can and you can take precautions, then do you do that but put yourself in potential health risks, or do you not do that and then put yourself in potential financial risk, which isn't ideal? And we know from a lot of our research, and you will as well, that a lot of these guys are one-man bands, and a lot of them will have done that because legally they can, and it makes more financial sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's good that package of support is out there, and the research also shows that people are intending to use the other sorts of things. So the two that we mentioned there have got all the headlines because there's sort of a decent amount of money potentially there if businesses are eligible. But there's a lot of interest also in things like mortgage holidays, VAT deferrals, the self-assessment holiday. In the next payment was due in July. A lot of businesses out there intending to use all of these things. They're fully prepared to use everything that's at their disposal, Joe. So it's all good, and the news is out there. So the information that they've had to alert them to this, it's clearly worked. But as I say, about I think the final figure was about 48% of these companies, they don't feel that goes far enough. And if this lockdown continues, for months rather than weeks, a lot of these businesses are very nervous about what the longer term future holds for them. It's nearly like we're sort of entering the second phase now, I think. So that survey came at the first phase, obviously towards or during the first 3 weeks of lockdown, and we asked people. We said, what are you intending to do to do with all your free time if you're not working? And it won't surprise you to know that practical things came out, like I'm going to get away, or I'm going to get around to all those DIY jobs that I've been intending to do.
Yeah, the mental list
nearly
of
8 in 10. That list doesn't go down, does it?
Yeah, never. Yeah.
Supporting family was another common one, and sort of cleaning out the van and sort of sorting out the garage as kind of like practical things. They came top of the list. Whereas sort of things which require a bit more thought, a bit more reflection, such as looking at your CPD, looking at your technical knowledge, doesn't need topping up. During that first phase, like I say, only about a quarter of people were saying that was something that they intended to do. I wonder now, for those installers that are still intending not to go out and make their services available, whether they'll start turning to those sorts of things to fill up their time. The realities of lockdown are settled down now. The dust has settled somewhat, hasn't it? We're out of that kind of panic stage. We know a lot more about our financials, and we discussed whether that's sufficient or not. But there's kind of a new reality going to bite now for those installers, I think, who aren't offering services.
Yeah, that leads us on quite nicely. So where next for the research? Because obviously you've spoken about phase one, and it was very reactive. It was like on the day that the country went into lockdown that you started the process, and now like you said, we're kind of into a phase two. We don't know what the next phases look like. So what's next for the research for you guys?
So we want to get the information out as far as possible. So thanks to you guys at Installer Mag, you've been wonderfully supportive in terms of promoting the survey in its first instance, but also getting some of the findings out there as well. If others want some more information about the research and some of the data that's sort of sitting underneath the surface, I'd encourage them to get in touch. I'd encourage installers to look through it as well. To reflect, that'll help them sort of reflect on, is my situation the same as other people? It can be sort of quite therapeutic to know that you're sort of not alone in terms of how you're approaching lockdown and in terms of your attitudes to things like that financial support. It does sort of now lead naturally onto possibly a second stage, depending on what the government announce after this next 3 weeks of lockdown. So that does sort of say to me, Joe, will there be a need to maybe revisit some of these installers, to catch up with them again and say, okay, so in that case, 6 weeks ago, you told us that your intentions were this, but now we've gone through this journey of lockdown, and maybe your attitude has changed. Maybe in terms of getting your hands on materials. So even if you want to work, can you work? It's a very disjointed picture still in terms of the merchants and the ones that are open and the ones that aren't, and nationals versus independents, and the types of service that they're all offering. That's all still settling down. Will government guidance change around that as well, in the way that it has for supermarkets? So as all this kind of new reality bites, it does sort of say to me as a researcher, we need to go back to them again and look at how that journey and those attitudes have changed. And that will really, really help the policymakers then in terms of thinking about probably the third stage, which is recovery. How do we help the sector get back to a place where it needs to be? Because we were hearing, quite optimistic going into the lockdown, which is the ultimate irony, isn't it?
Yeah, Q1 of this year for manufacturers and installers in the industry was a good quarter. So it looked like the industry was doing relatively well, doing a good standing. And that's without things like a big beast from the east or a big freeze that we would have had a couple of years ago that really ramps up for everyone. I think in some ways that's good, because it's come off of the industry was strong before this happened. So it's not like it was struggling and then it hit. I think everyone's hopefully optimistic that coming out the other side, it can go back, and you're starting from up here rather than down here or in the middle.
That's right. That's right. And you know, you and I are pragmatists, and we know many installers are, and we know the world's not going to be quite the same, and people will have to make adjustments to their workplace and the way that they go about their work. Interestingly, in the report, we heard and we highlight, for instance, that there's a lot more interest in diagnosing issues remotely. So using mobile phone technology, WhatsApp video calls, for instance. You know, it makes installers' jobs a lot easier if they don't have to be going here, there, and everywhere. If it's, you know, something quick that they could just observe over a video call. I think the sector, if I'm honest, is already a little bit behind where it should be if you compare it to others. So perhaps, you know, some good things are going to come out of lockdown in terms of encouraging installers to think about those sorts of solutions and those sorts of different ways of working, you know, a little bit more than they were. These are all areas where brands can input as well, aren't they, Joe? You know, and sort of help and support in installers in terms of their learning. I mentioned the CPD a few minutes ago to you, and I know a lot of the boiler companies have had sort of record approaches over the last few weekends in terms of people signing up. But you know, there'll be more of that, and the brands need to sort of react to that and put things on that they're going to help installers at the right time as we go through the rest of lockdown and as we come out the other end. And
no, I agree. I think there's a lot of things that can change for the better.
Yeah.
No, perfect.
Yeah.
Right, thanks a lot, Dave. And then we'll put loads of links in this when we embed this, so everyone can read it, catch up. They know where to go. They know who to support in. But yeah, thank you very much.
Is that all right?
Yeah, perfect.